Your job as a founder is to make yourself replaceable. If something, God forbid, would happen, there wouldn't be structures, systems, and people in place to move the company forward. You've only created a real company if it can work without you.
Nils is the co-founder and CEO of Ventore Group, operating real estate and hospitality across Bali, Dubai, Sicily, Cape Town, and Mallorca. He's here to break down how serious operators think when clarity is limited, decisions are irreversible, and reputation is always on the line.
Do you think you should have waited for clarity before you went forward?
Absolutely not. NVIDIA CEO, for example, said because he just put one step in front of the other, that's how he was able to build.
If you take a step back and you could turn back things, is it avoidable or is it not avoidable?
I'd say it's not avoidable. We realized that we cannot rely on third parties. If you work and you give too much responsibilities to third parties, like a contractor, if they screw up, they can blame someone else or whatever, but you're not in control.
You not only are managing, you're also building, operating real estate. But before you started all of that, you started with Brave Art, which when you operate and you manage Instagram and marketing, the results are you can reverse them really fast. But in real estate, things are much longer and capital is locked from investors. When you decided to make that leap, what is an unknown that you accepted at the time and how did that play out?
I believe the unknown for me was the complexity in all of this. As you said, when I did marketing, it was a very quick adaptation. The time between, let's say, recording a video to posting a video isn't very long. You can fix stuff very easily. And not having an actual real estate background, I did underestimate the complexity and the many moving parts that you have. Because also in an agency, like you're building an agency, you have maybe a videographer, you have a video editor, and you have a social media manager. That's everything. In real estate, or with what we're doing, you're combining acquisition with architects, and architects is broken down into structure and MEP and architectural design and quantity surveying. And then you have the construction where you deal with suppliers, builders, and everything. And then you have the ongoing hospitality operations where you deal with thousands of different customers and different preferences that they have. So I did underestimate the complexity, and I'm happy that I did, because I don't know if I would have started, if I would have known.
What would you say is the hardest thing you underestimated? And did it turn out different than what you thought or same?
I believe the hardest thing I underestimated was likely the impact of value engineering.
Value engineering
Project. Yeah.
Do you think you should have waited for clarity on that
Absolutely not.
before you went forward?
Absolutely not.
Why
No.
not?
Because in the end, looking back, everything has happened for a reason, and it led us to be exactly where we are now. And I remember the NVIDIA CEO, for example, he also said, because he just put one step in front of the other, that's how he was able to build. If he would have known the complexity of what they're doing now, basically impossible. But just because you take one step in front of the other keeps you on a clear path. And that's why I believe waiting for perfectionism is never a good idea. As long as you're able to control that next step, you're good. And that's what you always need to do. And you're never able, or you should never grow faster than when you're not, if you're not in control of the next step, you should slow down. But as long as you can manage the next 1 to 2 steps that you're planning and that you do need to take care of, you have a good balance of growth and stability.
Interesting. So you decided to first start as an investor in Bali. And at that time, public reports show that there was things happening on the ground. that maybe were not so clear. What was a gap that you saw that was different on paper versus reality? And then how did you address it?
It was the end of COVID, roughly. So borders just opened up again. And I believe what we saw is an incredible potential of actual cost versus value. Value is what something is worth, and cost is what we pay for it, right? So we were thinking, compared to other investments, if even if we take a very conservative approach, the cost still justifies the value or the output of that value, aka the cash flow that a rental property would make at that point. So, yeah, even with uncertainty considered, we took the leap of faith because, in a conservative case, we were still happy with the outcome. And that's still how I invest today. It's, am I happy with what I believe the conservative outcome could be, like my worst case scenario? That's the case.
But
Move
then,
forward.
was there a discrepancy? Like, did you, you got into actually owning the construction from being just an investor. Take me through that. What was the discrepancy you saw? And was it avoidable if you take a step back and you could turn back things? Is it avoidable or is it not avoidable?
I'd say it's not avoidable. When we started as an just investor, we or my wife bought one villa. We renovated it together. We kind of built our small team, tested like a contractor here, architect here, and then we did our first own project, where we kind of had a mix of being in control but still working with a contractor, and that just pointed out some problems when you rely on third parties too much, especially in developing countries like Southeast Asia. Building quality standards, contracts amongst contractors and suppliers are basically non-existent. So as we kind of scale from being an investor with one individual property to scaling to multiple developments, we realized that we cannot rely on third parties.
What happened at the time that was like, how did you realize that, look, I want to go from being an investor to actually doing it myself, owning the team on the ground? What was that friction there?
I'd say the first step from becoming an investor to a developer was just out of interest. We had a small social media following. We shared kind of our renovation, and people were just very interested in an investment opportunity such as that. So one problem that I had with marketing is always very subjective. And even numbers don't really guarantee success, right? So and same with consulting work. You can give the best advice. If people don't take it and act on it, your advice is basically worthless.
Right.
So I did like the challenge of building something where someone can objectively look if that's a good product or a bad product. And with real estate, you can, right? So the step from just being an investor to developer was very much just out of interest from our network and me seeing a business opportunity there. Then what caused us from just going to a developer to vertically integrated in our whole kind of product journey was because of supplier issues, quality issues, timeline issues. And in the end, we were like, if we fuck up but we're in control, then we can at least blame ourselves. If you work and you give too much responsibilities to third parties, like a contractor, if they screw up, they can blame someone else or whatever. But you're not in control.
So you wanted to own outcomes.
Exactly.
But what drove you to own outcomes? Was it opportunity or was it frustration?
Both, but mainly frustration. Mainly frustration.
What would you say is, when you made that decision to move from investor to operator, what is a decision that you see now that you realize that you can't reverse back?
We're too big. at some point, I believe in 2024, I did realize no matter how I feel about this business, it's too big to stop. Right? The agency, I was like, if I don't want to do the agency anymore, and we're like 10 people, and I am still kind of the sole operator, I'm kind of the backbone of this company. Like, if I don't want to do it anymore, the agency goes downhill. But some point in 2024, when we were hiring pretty fast, starting to build the construction team, building the architecture teams, I did realize that even if I wouldn't kind of want to continue anymore, we would place a CEO and the company would keep running.
The operating company.
All of them. Just because it's too big to stop. Like it's not just dependent on your feelings anymore.
For Ventore Group now that manages 250 people across different countries, when people look at the outside, they see an organization chart and they believe that power and decisions are all made in exactly in that chart. The reality is that there are many outside stakeholders that have a very big impact on how things happen, especially when you're talking about real estate and development. Who was the outside person that had the biggest impact on where you are today? And how do you change your thinking going forward based on that?
That's a very good question. Biggest person outside. I believe the biggest impact of like outside people were the investors, and their kind of demand and interest, because that also drives what we are kind of reacting to in a way, because as Steve Jobs said, the customer doesn't always know what he actually wants until you present him something. So that's kind of a balance where you do need to be careful of like, what does the market want and what do you believe is good for the market? You need to find some middle ground there. And the other part were absolutely legal advisors. Very underestimated in every country.
What is something that didn't go as you expected?
Everything.
Like, did the bad decision happen and then you realize?
I wouldn't say they're necessarily bad decisions. There is then a way on how you adapt to something, because circumstances change, right? For example, sign an MOU, but some conditional on some conditions to be fulfilled, and that on both parties doesn't happen in time, but both people are still eager to drive the deal forward. You need to get back on the table, evaluate where you stand now, and make a deal happen.
Take me to a time where that happened.
So that was actually last year in 2025, where we've been to Cape Town. We scouted everything and drafted a sales and purchase agreement for a hotel acquisition. And that was conditional on us raising funds, us being VAT registered, exchange control approval, stuff like that. And on the seller's side, it was conditional on them providing employment contracts and certain certificates and so on. And the deadline came close, and we didn't have the exchange control approval yet and the VAT registration. And
what's an exchange control?
South Africa, for example, they have a reserve bank, and they do control how much money you bring in and get out of the country. So if you want to structure some deals with intercompany loans, you need to get approval from the National Reserve Bank.
Just move currency around.
Yeah, exactly.
Seemed to be a very powerful party in the development.
Yes, definitely. It is a tax play though. Like you can very easily just as with paying a dividend, you can just get money out.
So
But yeah,
once you realize where that power sat, how did you do things differently then?
I didn't because I knew before. It was, and that's one thing that's in our case so important is we really take time to understand the market and to do our due diligence before we even start committing to any projects in that location, because that is something that we are aware of, that every, especially in the way that we operate with the designing, building or renovating and operating, we do need to find the right jurisdictions. So we do need to know the jurisdictions in and out and model that into our financial model, find structures that work for us, protect our downside. So we were aware of that. That thing just took longer than expected, also because we were still waiting on some documents from the seller side. But that then was just okay. Some CPs weren't fulfilled on your side. Some CPs weren't fulfilled on our side. Let's get it on the get on the table, draft an addendum, and get the deal done. And that's that adaptability that you always need in business, I believe.
Mm. You know, Ventore Group is a mix between creative directions and operation excellence
Yeah.
across multiple countries. With that being said, how do you and your co-founder decide what decisions are made, who makes what decision, so things don't get slowed down? And more importantly, what are decisions that are not open for discussion?
So for that, we need to look at how you go from just a founder-led brand that we were in the beginning to a proper organization. Founder-led is the founders are on the forefront. They're making every decision, basically making every decision together as well, but across all kind of departments. But that's at some point not sustainable. And then you need to look at what different hats is everyone wearing. So you need to differentiate between shareholder, your actual job and position, and, for example, director, commissioner, whatever. And with you wearing all of those different hats, you have different responsibilities within different guidelines. So your job is, my job as CEO is to run the company, to drive it forward. Job as creative director is to direct the creative vision of our projects, of our marketing, and how we present the brand, what experience we want to create. So in 2025, we decided to switch from founder-led to proper organization, building out the different departments.
Sure, but why did you, was there friction or, what was that turning point that got you guys to decide, let's move from a founder-led to actual organization?
Risk mitigation. Founder-led is very dependent on founder. And if something, God forbid, would happen to either of us, there wouldn't be structures, systems, and people in place to move the company forward. Your job as a founder is to make yourself replaceable. You've only created a real company if it can work without you. And to do that, you do need to, at some point, switch from founder-led, which in an organization, you can still, within your job and as a shareholder, you still guide the direction and the vision and everything. But the day-to-day is handled by people in departments with clear systems. So it was a risk mitigation strategy.
But did you guys have that clarity from the beginning, or did some friction happen? And did you get a push from investors or from your partners, or did the situation get you guys to get to that turning point to say, fine, now we move from founder-led?
we did have that vision in mind that we do want to build a sustainable company that's bigger than us as individuals. But then it was actually some team members bringing it up that just kind of pushed the priority up a bit last year. But
Interesting.
there
So
was no
people
friction
in the
or
team
anything.
said,
Yes,
why
yeah.
don't you guys?
Exactly, because we, for our key positions, like our head of departments or our C-suite, we are actively hiring people. Ex-WeWork, for example, Fosters and Partners, one of the biggest architecture firms, like people that have been in either established corporate or in hypergrowth startups that just bring that level of professionalism and experience when it comes to what happens at a hypergrowth startup.
Very interesting.
If you're looking at the UAE seriously, one of the hardest parts is actually knowing how to operate at a senior level with credibility and judgment. HAO Strategies was founded by Her Excellency Hind Al Utaiba, former UAE ambassador to France. The firm advises companies and institutions navigating complex markets where reputation and trust really matter. It's not traditional consulting, it's senior, high stakes strategy built around discretion and long term positioning. You can learn more at haostrategies.com.
Many people think that decisions need to be split equally between co-founders. You're saying there needs to be structure.
Yeah.
Is that structure to improve speed, or is consensus more important? Like, how do you decide?
It's a balance, but I do believe, especially in a very fast-growing startup, speed is very important. Here we are bootstrapped, so we don't have any VC money, and we're not like just burning cash for the sake of growth. So even our speed and growth needs to be sustainable. But there are also different expertises, and that's something that Jake and I, for example, have known from the start. If he, for example, comes up with the idea of white horses on a black beach, I'm like, you're the expert. I'll find a way, or I'll tell you how many horses we can get within our budget.
So if it's creative, then the decisions go one way, and if it's
Yeah.
and that's how you keep speed ahead without basically causing a discussion on each and every. You don't need consensus on everything.
No, especially if it's especially small things. And if the decision that's being made on an individual department doesn't fit the bigger picture, it actually only shows up if it's big enough. And if it's big enough, it shows up automatically. So for example, for one of our projects, we did see when the BOQ came back, and I usually don't really get involved in design, but we got the BOQ back, finance department, we reviewed it, and I identified the floor material and the wall finishing as a huge cost driver that was not sustainable for our budgets. So I wouldn't usually get involved in design, but then it is something that's important enough to be raised across different departments and affect the company's sustainability, let's say. So then you do get involved as the position of the CEO, and you do then with the architecture department, with Jake, with the construction department, with finance, you go back, look at it, and find a solution. But imagine us going, like all of those departments, going through 100 different wall finishings and their prices to determine what we need. Big waste of time. Because if the problem is big enough, it will show up again at a later point.
So interesting you say that. If a problem is big enough, but what is big enough? Like how many hours need to go into it before it comes to you then? Or how do you decide then what is big enough?
I'd say, big enough when it comes to me, something different than when it's big enough. Because big enough kind of works on a scale where it could just be where it's big enough to get seen or noticed or doesn't fit with the vision, budget, strategy of another department. And that is already a big enough. But that's then just two head of departments, for example, figuring it out together. When I get involved, is usually then first if I think that I have something smart to say or to add, or third if I get actively involved by the heads of departments or other C-suite members that go, let's have a meeting about this with Nils as well, or in reports, because of course each department kind of reports up.
Right. With investor-facing businesses like Ventore, people assume everything's going to go according to the book, according to what's planned. But the truth is there are a lot of trade-offs. Construction doesn't happen on time. A risk shows up and takes more than it's expected. And this communication between investors and Ventore Group is something that needs to be balanced. In the early days of Ventore Group, how did you decide what to say and what not to say? And how did that impact your decisions moving forward?
The important differentiation is that our investors don't invest in our company, they do invest in our projects. And therefore, from the start, we had a very clear product that we needed to deliver. And basically, anything it took to deliver that product, we just had to deal with it as a company. And only if we thought we need to adjust the product or we need to adjust the model, then we need to communicate. Because the investors' worry shouldn't be a concrete shortage, for example. So
if it's not impacting the investor, then you contain it.
Then we just deal with it.
And you just deal with it.
Because we have a very clear product that the investor invested in, which is a villa, a boutique hotel. And as long as we are able, within what we planned, to deliver it, no matter if there's rain or like more rain or less rain than usual, these are things that we have to deal with as a team. However, one thing that we have done from the start is we did start with weekly updates, and now we're on bi-weekly construction updates.
So that's for the investors.
That's for the investors.
But how do you decide? How do you decide what to be transparent about or to contain?
Being transparent about everything that ultimately affects the product outcome. Contain everything else.
Give me an example of something you contained.
For a very long time, for example, in the last year, there were some ferries capsizing, and therefore the Indonesian government made stronger regulations around the ferries between Jakarta and Bali, and that impacted steel and concrete availability very heavily. And we dealt with it. We kept being on schedule for a very long time, so we didn't communicate it. It's a problem that our teams have to deal with. It's within the scope of what could come up. Only once it basically becomes a force majeure and we really, like, our hands are bound, like we can't do anything anymore, and it impacts the delivery timeline, then you go out and communicate proactively.
And did ever protecting something force you to be more cautious then?
Yes, we definitely did get more cautious over time. But I also believe that comes with certain scale becomes bigger responsibility and approaching things more conservatively. Whereas because smaller projects you can manage like something comes up, whatever, like you deal with it, because it is in a scale where it's pretty easy to handle, pretty easy to oversee. The bigger you get, the more conservative the approaches in the due diligence, in like background checks of partners you're working with, also in the modeling, in the construction buffers, and so on, because at a certain scale, right, a 10% increase in some costs can have a massive impact.
You speak about scale a lot, and you're working across multiple countries. And with that rapid growth, there's always this constraint between growth and keeping up quality and consistency. Was there any chance that you had for growth, but you intentionally shot down? And why did you shoot it down?
Absolutely. Um, especially back in 2024, we would have had opportunities to develop huge projects, big land sizes, just individual villas, which would have basically printed.
Where was this?
In Bali, because it was the market was booming. Everyone wanted a villa, and everyone was looking for a developer with some credibility.
Why not take it, Nils? You have that credibility.
Because we knew that individual villas or townhouses in Bali are not sustainable, and we would not be able to long term manage or we wouldn't be able to long term keep results as where the expectations of investors are. Because at that time, everyone was promising like 20% net yield per year. And we did see that supply is rising. There's no real constraint on land where you can build. It's flat land, it's rice fields. You can just turn a rice field into a villa, basically.
Right.
And so we were sure that if we do that, it would be a cash grab, but it wouldn't be a sustainable business.
Wouldn't be sustainable.
Not at the level that was expected by investors or villa owners.
But people say if there's demand, move where there's demand. What do you say to that?
And that's going back to what I said earlier. Even if there is demand, but you don't believe in it, you shouldn't be doing it.
You should follow your
integrity.
gut. Yeah, but what do you think would have gone wrong if you didn't follow your gut then?
We would have developed in a direction that is not scalable across multiple countries that easily, which is just residential holiday rental townhouses and villas that are nothing special, but still telling people that they would get 20% yield, and then failing on that, and therefore reputation going down.
You know, you speak about scaling, and scaling requires hiring. Was there ever a hire that you didn't make, and why didn't you make it?
There was a hire that we didn't make up
Or you
until
perhaps waited for it?
last week. Was an international group head of construction. And funny enough, for whatever reason, we were like, we already, like, we have a good team within the local jurisdictions to manage the construction. We are above average when it comes to standards, timelines, managing construction sites. And only like 2 months ago we really realized that if like our biggest cost driver is construction and the construction cost.
Mm.
So imagine you hire someone for 100,000 euros a year, but your construction cost sits somewhere at like 10 to 15 million euros. If that person just because it's a group very experienced leader, if that person just finds one or two things where a structure engineer made a mistake, or the superimposing of the architecture team on the other consultant plans has gone wrong. 100,000 euros that you're paying for that person, for example, is nothing compared to what that person can save. And that's a hire that we waited for a long time, just because we didn't prioritize it. And looking back, I'm like, should have prioritized that a long time ago.
Interesting. So the person you met last week, did you think that he's going to make it?
We did hire someone last week. We did
Okay.
meet them a bit before, yeah. But we're very happy to onboard later this month.
So back, I want to take you back to the time where you were leading a growing marketing brand.
Yeah.
Where you were doing things and you get the result really fast. You post something on Instagram, they tell you if it's good or not, you can change, repost. Where you are today is you make a decision, it takes many months, could be even years, where it plays out. You know, constructing something, and then delivery is a different ballgame. Your instinct as a human is to move really fast, update and change. How has your instinct changed over time to address this new reality for you?
Definitely learning patience and trusting. You need to trust yourself that the decision that you have made a year ago and that you did consider very well has the potential to play out. With also realizing that some things are out of your control, and markets and situations can change over the course of 1 to 2 years. Right? There are things that are out of your control.
Take me to a decision you made using your instinct of moving fast, and then you realized, no, this business is different. It doesn't work the same way.
Yeah. Panicking. Getting, for example, a BOQ, planned the project, got the BOQ. The structure consultant submitted a set of drawings, and then went back and was like, oh no, I don't think that they're right. Like, I'll work over my drawings. The result was a very hefty increase in our structure costs. And you kind of get that message, or you're in a meeting, that message gets delivered, and you're like, shit, what are we doing now? And you start to panic and try to find different, very irrelevant things to change to try to make it right. Because your irrational self just wants to feel better, right? Like your instinct just wants to fix that problem. But as you said, it takes time, because a structure engineer can go over the plans again. You can speak to the architecture team about value engineering, and you make a plan. Might take 1 or 2 months until you have an updated cost estimation. But in that moment, in that next 24 hours, trying to cut every little thing and be like, nah, I believe in, and now we can't hire that person, or we shouldn't be doing this. That's just irrational panicking.
Take me to that moment where you realized that speed would hurt the outcome. What happened? When did you realize, when you held that BOQ, that, hey, if I act too fast?
It was while I was going over it and trying to find things that we can change. Like, if I now start pressuring people into ideas that I haven't even stress tested myself, this will likely just put pressure on other people, removing their ability to think clearly and zooming out, looking at the bigger picture and finding solutions. So I need to restrain myself from doing that to myself, so I don't, like, my actions don't impact the experts working on this problem. I can zoom out, and once I zoom out, I can lead and guide. But jumping into the problem, putting pressure on one single thing that maybe doesn't move the needle, I realized It's your job to always zoom out, see the bigger picture, find options and guide people, but let them make the decision where they're an expert in.
Very interesting. You know, you started running this Bali project initially through WhatsApp messages and controlling things as an investor. At what point did you realize that you wanted to get on the ground and take control of the actual development and control the outcome?
After that was in 2024 as well. And that was just after suppliers, after we've experienced how frustrating it can be if there's no clear communication between architects, construction team, and the suppliers, and how much time it takes to fix mistakes that were done. That was the moment where we're like, okay, boots on the ground, we're building this ourselves.
What specific thing happened in that you realized that this update that I'm getting is very different than what's actually happening on the ground?
There wasn't that one thing, but there was just a series of updates that did not feel like they're covering everything. And that's one thing, for example, that we've done now is with, of course, CCTV on all of our sites. First, of course, to prevent theft, but also just to have you're able to see the whole project and not just one room. If you only get WhatsApp updates, you can frame things very easily.
What do you look for now? That's very interesting you say it. What do you look for now that's different than those WhatsApp messages?
I mean, now I'm not looking that closely anymore because we have teams that look and then report up. But back in those days, I looked at very specific things that needed to be done or that were late, for example. Now I look at the bigger picture of construction and site management, processes, reprioritization, for example, the use of equipment and how that can impact the speed of the project. So that was one thing, for example. We had, for one of the projects, we had 2 excavators working. And the team were like giving those updates, and I was thinking something's not right. Like we can improve here. And then I was like, okay, how long does it take us, or like set us back, to only have 2 excavators working here? Like, what would be the impact of a third one? What would be the cost impact versus the speed that we could gain? Make a simulation for me. Because also you give people a very clear goal or mandate, right? Like the construction team needs to make sure that the construction stays within budget. But the construction team has that mandate. But the investment or investor relations team, for example, has the mandate to have happy investors, is to increase reinvestment rate. What does that need? That needs speed. But they have different mandates. So you do need to, it needs to be someone who always translates. And as I said earlier, zooms out, looks at the bigger picture. Yeah.
You were talking about construction now. What's a decision that worked technically, but you realized it could have been done better? It just didn't blow up.
Oh, so many things. From the pumping system in our first project to the networking design system in our first project. They do work, but they're not optimal.
Take me behind the scenes.
For example, in a lot of Western country, pressure pumps are like just a normal thing, and so using a pressure tank that like just fills up and then distributes water, and that's not as standard in Asia. So you have like one individual pump that's as soon as you pull on the tap and water comes out, needs to manually always like run on the pump and distribute water without there being a tank that is pressurized that's filled already. Or for like the networking design, for every accommodation on the project site, having an individual Wi-Fi networking system instead of one that's just shared and can be centrally managed. Those are things that it's same thing as material choices that you see, like they do work, and for example they do work for social media, and that's also always one thing that we have to balance: Instagrammability and practicality. Because if you go full white, beige tones, that gets dirty very, very easily. It's very Instagrammable. It just takes, like, you need to hire one extra person because you need to do more cleaning. And that's just a continuous learning process where all of those things, MEP design, we have the first few projects, we went over, and for the second project, we did caught it in time. The whole light switch and lighting positioning plans. Because you work with consultants that do that stuff for you, and then you maybe for different projects work with different consultants, and they just always put the light switches where they think they're best.
Right.
But then we did it. We realized it wouldn't have blown up. We just looked from our first project. We're like, there's some things that we can improve, and that's also one very important thing to have. Like, always that connection with your own product. You need to experience it for yourself. You need to see and feel what can you improve for the next ones.
So for the next ones, how would you do things differently then?
Well, first we did choose materials that are more durable, that are that balance between Instagrammability and practicality. Light switches, having light switches when you enter a room, always on one specific side. And we've now developed a kind of system or standards is the better word for it, that we can just share to all of our consultants that we work with. And that's a standard that we have now established across all countries. And because here again, a South African MEP consultant, for example, does their plans different than the Indonesian one or the European one.
But in different countries, sorry to interrupt, in different countries, I'm just comparing it to driving a car. I'm used to driving a car on the left side. I hear in other countries, people drive on the right side. So, but for opening light switches, it's always the same for all humans in all countries? Or does that local contractor customize it for that audience?
For us, it doesn't really matter. We need a standardized product, as we have people from all around the world staying in multiple of our accommodation services.
Got it.
It's the same thing as Hilton or Four Seasons just having, let's say, the same mattress across all of their projects. So you have a consistent feeling and identification with the brand.
When you compare your days at Brave Art versus today at Ventore, what has changed most in your decision making before committing to a project?
What's changed the most in my decision making? The thing that changed the most is now relying more on a combination of gut feeling and data, versus at the agency it was only gut feeling. Because it was marketing, because you could reverse stuff very easily, gut feeling was enough. And I basically did everything of like gut feeling. Like, should we take on this client? Yes. Should we take on this project? Yes.
And now,
Can we actually do and execute this? We'll work it out. And now it's getting together with teams and different departments, evaluating an opportunity on the data and then on the circumstances that that there are just on a personal or like an energetic level, let's say. So there was a project that we did say no to in Sicily. We were pretty deep in due diligence and in finding the right partners, design, and like we flew a lot of our team there to go experience. But so we got together with finance department for the modeling. Got together, engaged a law firm to do due diligence on the specific way we wanted to operate and the risks that we saw, get their evaluation on it. And energetically, it worked. Such a beautiful project. So much potential.
your initial gut feeling was yes.
Yes,
And-
absolutely. But the data said, it didn't say no, but it was out of my risk appetite. Where I'd be like, remember what I said earlier, when if I can live with the conservative outcome and it's still a good investment or it's still a good project, then do it. If not, you don't.
The
And
conservative outcome is the worst case scenario or the middle case scenario?
conservative is somewhere between worst case and pessimistic.
Okay, interesting.
Sorry, no. Somewhere between worst case and realistic.
Okay.
So the worst case, of course, is always a project like completely defaulting and not being realized. But then you have the realistic outcome of what you believe you can comfortably achieve. And then your conservative outcome would be, okay, there would be operational problems, there would be a financial crisis that impacts how much people can spend, yada, yada, yada. And only if, for in my risk appetite at least, if I still believe in the conservative outcome, then you go do it. And there were just some risk parameters that were just out of line, and therefore it didn't match energetic and gut feeling and the data. It does need to do both, for me at least.
Interesting. But out of all, you said working with legal, working with finance, selecting a partner, all of those things. With all of that being said, what is the most important thing that you learned now to pay attention to before committing? Because the risk of reversing it later becomes very high or painful.
Can you repeat that?
So out of all the experiences out of all the things you need to have set up before you commit a yes, what is the thing that you pay the most attention to now before saying yes? Because the cost becomes very high later or painful if you want to reverse that decision.
Right now, operational structures, in the sense of due diligence, permits, and all of this. This is like the foundation. That's the basis of everything, because these are things that you need to work within. And after that, second priority then becomes financial models, preliminary studies, and so on.
So legal above finance.
Yes, because you do need to, first of all, be comfortable working within the operational frameworks that jurisdictions or that project offers.
I was once told that to enter a new country, you need two people. You need a lawyer and you need an accountant. You're saying the lawyer supersedes the accountant, is on top then? Because if the lawyer says it's a no-go, then there's no point entering financially into that system to begin with.
Exactly. And it's not just about, in my opinion at least, it's not just about the due diligence and a lawyer saying no. It's also about you understanding stuff. How, for example, exchange control approval, what we spoke about earlier. And then is that something that you can work with? Is that something that fits in your operating model? Because yes, if it doesn't, there's no point in even doing a financial model.
Become illegal.
Exactly.
Today, Ventore positions itself as design-led boutique hotels all over the world. It's led by many things, by things that take a long time, designs, construction. Some might even say it's boring. What are really big decisions that you spend your own time and energy trying to protect so that they don't happen or repeat, that people don't usually see from your position as the CEO of the company?
I would say these are usually decisions that involve strategy, because what you need to keep in mind that as the CEO, you're basically the only person getting all of the relevant information from all departments across the whole company and all operating fields. So while you of course need to avoid working in silos and like every department just doing their thing, they need to communicate. You also always need to realize that one of the only people with all of the information is usually the CEO. And therefore, the strategic input and how that all fits together, I believe that those are decisions that I spent most of my time with, and checking those with the individual chiefs or heads of departments.
Like, does that time go into thinking about operators, guest experience, or something else? Where is the maximum time that yours goes into that people don't see? Because you have all of that information.
Yeah, the maximum time, likely finance. Yeah, just checking on the models, invoicing, cash flow management, expense controls, budgets. Yeah, anything with a good combination of tasks that drive the company forward and tasks that protect the current operational standard and situation that the company is in.
Interesting. So now, what do you do differently before handover or after handover to protect that kind of finance risk?
Can you say that again, please?
Like, if you're spending a lot of your time in the finance, is that post handover or before handover?
Continuous.
Always.
Both. As we go full circle from the initial idea to the operational management of the project, it just is continuous. Yeah. However, with focus likely being before and during the development, because this is where it all needs to fit together with between architecture and construction and finance and then the hospitality.
Yeah. Plus,
So
the investors will
yes.
probably point it out.
Yeah.
If
So there might be a like focus on pre-development and development.
Very interesting. Nils, I got two more questions for you. One of it is, if I'm a 25-year-old studying in university today, hoping to be a CEO of a multi-country company, what should I study?
I've never went to university, so I don't know. But what you should study is learning by doing. Start something. Go start something. Or work very closely with someone who's already doing it. I do believe that if you're entrepreneurial, one thing that people I believe underestimate is become like an executive assistant or like a personal assistant to someone who is where you want to be, or intern, or if not, if you're like really entrepreneurial, you just start something. And I would absolutely suggest, like, I'm so happy that I've built the foundation in my marketing agency, that I kind of knew how it was to be an entrepreneur with a service-based business. Because you do learn to just hold your patience in different situations, and you are you're able to handle more pressure. Imagine going into business, and the first thing you do is like you have so many moving parts, and I believe you get over your head pretty quickly.
All right. And you have a presence in many countries. Your holdco is in Dubai, but there's no operation in Dubai. What are you protecting?
There's operation in Dubai.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
we are. Depends on how you view operations, but our team and the project management of these different projects is through Dubai, and a Dubai-based team.
So Dubai
is a
is
mix of Dubai and remote.
excellent.
Yeah.
One more question before we let you go. For everyone that made it this far in the episode and doesn't press the subscribe button, what is your advice for them?
Please do, because Mahmoud is one of the best interviewers and an awesome person. Because I do remember when we first met, you like your story and your insights were very fascinating. So I believe also from the guests that you already had on, people do miss out if they don't hit the subscribe button.
Thank you, Nils. Pleasure.
Of course.
Thank you for sharing your experience and your time with us.
Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.